and welcome to the 7th episode of Smokey and the One-Armed Bandit. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing on a whole bunch of small jobs that I've been putting off for a while now. Recently, we've just been focusing on big jobs like the rear end, but those little jobs have been piling up, so I'm going to smash through those today. We've got a couple of changes to the car. In particular, I've got new wheels, so I thought I might quickly show you guys those first. So here she is. Got new wheels. These are work Euro lines. I picked them up off Marketplace recently. I think they look pretty good for the car. Kind of figured that Euro lines on a Euro makes sense. I got re-drilled rotors in there on the rear. I've also got them for the front, but I need to actually fit them. I got bored and put the boot back on it. This one came with the car. It's a CSL style carbon fiber boot. I was originally going to sell it, but I kind of have a thing for ducktails, and well, I think that looks pretty sick, so I think that might hang around. I might keep that. But that's enough standing back and admiring. Probably should get something actually done. So we'll come down the front here and I'll show you what we had to do to fit this wheel on with the Nissan stud pattern. Well, wheels off. Got the hub here in front of us. And as you can see, I've gone with studs on here because I hate bolt holes. If you come around the side, you can see there's plenty of room for the head of the stud, but there isn't enough room to actually get the stud out. So no more NASCAR style bloody pit changes, wheel changes, because if you do mess up the end of the stud, you're going to have to remove the whole hub to get it out. So that's a bit of a bugger, but I haven't broken any studs yet, so fingers crossed we should be all good. As you can see, these new studs aren't actually perfectly in the center of the old two bolt holes as we go around the stud pattern, and that's just because we've got an extra hole to contend with, thanks to needing to bolt the rotor to the hub on the original setup. And that hole is right there. It's centered in between the two standard wheel bolt holes. The easier thing to do for the machine shop was to simply just offset it halfway in between those two holes. On these ones, on the rotors, it was actually easier just to put the holes in the middle of the old bolt holes and then just elongate that part out that holds the rotor to the hub. So that's what we've done. Now we just need to bolt the rotor onto there and put the caliper on and then bolt the wheel on. So I'm back down the hill. I've got a whole week of holidays that I can now start to do bits and pieces to Smokey. So I've got a few little extra jobs I can do down at my own house. Starting with this. So this is obviously the 370Z Diff. What I'm going to need to do is shim that up nice and tight so that it's basically the next thing from a locker. And yeah, get that nice and tight so it's spinning two wheels. I've done similar things on this before, which is also an R200. The diffs are a little bit different, but I'm hoping that the LSD is sort of pretty similar, as I've done about 3 of those before. So I'm going to shim it so tight that it's skipping around car parks, but I find it's got just that little bit more give than a welded diff, so you can still do grip days without it having that front end push. So I'm going to pull this apart, pull out the diff and shimmer up. Got to remember what side these shims go on, otherwise you're buggered when you put it back together, because these are properly shimmed so that they all line up in here correctly. Well, the diff's out and on the bench. It all came apart pretty easy. I was pretty careful to make sure that I keep things clean and also that I label things. So I've labelled those there, I've labelled the spider gears, and I've also labelled in particular these shims and bearing cases. Well, I'm back from the shops now. I got myself a 0.8 shim, and I also found a 1.3 in my stash of old Nissan bits. So I've got enough here that I can have a play around and figure out what combo is going to be the right ones. So I'll put this together, and then I'll have a fiddle around, figure out which shims are going to be the right ones for this LSD. And that is just about perfect. There's no gap all the way around between those two. So I'm pretty happy. Obviously the crown wheel isn't the gap that we're talking about, it's the two smaller parts up the top. One of the things that's really easy to forget when doing this is people forget to line that spline up with that spline there. And the reason you need to do that is because this half shaft will go through both of them. This one doesn't, but this one will. And when you go to put this in, if that isn't lined up with that, you won't get the half shaft all the way in. But you won't figure that out till you go to actually put the half shaft in at the very end of rebuilding the diff. So make sure that you're able to do that, because I've had it before where I've had to pull them all apart again and realign them. I have a thing where I'll actually put this over the top of the half shaft and put everything over the splines as I'm going, just so that it's all lined up and I don't have to think too much about it. Well, we ended up coming up the hill to complete the diff just because these crown wheel bolts are quite difficult to do up by yourself, because you've got to hang on to the actual diff and tighten them up to a pretty high torque spec. So what we did was we actually put the diff into the diff case, because it would be a bit easier to clamp down when we had it like that. I think technically you're supposed to do these up to like 58 foot-pound, and then you put another 31 to 36 degrees on the bolt. But that's kind of a bit of a pain to do. So what we did was we basically did that on the first one, figured out the torque that ended up taking it to, and replicated that on the rest of the bolts. Just because it's, when you're putting that much force through something, it's really hard to try and get the right amount of degrees. So we just did it that way. I'm confident it'll be fine. Now I've just got to do up these caps to torque spec. I think they're 70 foot-pound from memory. And once I've done that, I can chuck the half shafts on, chuck the cover on, fill it with oil, and it should be good to go in the car and do some 20s. So the diff's all done now. Another thing ticked off the list, got that rear hat on there. Probably used a bit too much gasket goo, but better safe than sorry. No guarantees this will necessarily last as long as the 180s has. I may need to re-shim it in a few years, but hopefully this will be good for a little while. Got to do a couple more things before I can actually put it into the car though. The rear subframe needs to be either painted or like zinc coated, something along those lines, to make sure it doesn't rust, and then this thing will be able to go in the car for the final time. So you're probably going to notice in the background today that there's going to be a couple of other bits and pieces going on that I haven't shown you guys. We're actually shooting episode 7, 8 and 9 all simultaneously, so there will be some bits and pieces in the background that'll come in future episodes. For the moment though, I've got to knock off the little job of mounting the steering column in an appropriate location. Got to make sure that it's not too high. When you put all the hub adapters and the quick releases and the steering wheel on the steering column, makes the steering wheel sit up about here. I don't really want that, so we're going to angle it down. Dad's built up some spaces, and I'll just show you guys that quickly. So here's the steering column. You can see the first two spaces in there, and you can also see the other two further down. The other two actually we had to knock the stud out of and then put a nut and bolt solution, which was a little bit of a pain in the butt, but all looking pretty good now. Dad turned these up on the lathe out of solid bar aluminum, as you Americans might say. So yeah, all looking pretty good. Steering wheel's at a pretty decent height. It could probably go a little higher, but we've still got the standard adjustability down there for the E46 column. So we can move it forwards, backwards, up and down a bit and get it in the perfect position for me. And the steering wheel is pretty much the centerpiece of the controls, so now we've got that sorted, we can start looking at the other bits and pieces like handbrake and gear shifter and seating position. So that's the steering column sorted. Next thing I need to do is button up a couple of things on the rear end, do some painting, get the subframe so it's zinc plated, and also put some bushes in and just basically reassemble it. So that's the next thing I need to do. I want to get the car rolling again, get it off Dad's hoist for a couple of minutes so he can work on his own car. Well, I'm under the car now. You can see that I've already primed these a while back. I've also done some seam sealing. I want to make sure that no moisture or water gets in between the plates. The hard part is I sort of cleaned up this section, but there's so much dirt and other crap under here from all the years of driving on the road that I can only sort of clean out so far. So I'm just going to paint the bits that are important. A bit of overspray goes onto the dirt or the other parts. I guess it'll probably fall off in time, but this is mainly to make sure it doesn't rust, so cosmetics aren't too much of the importance here. Well, that's all painted now, which I'm pretty happy about. I'm glad to be done with the plates underneath here because it's been a bit of a journey, but got there in the end. You can see it's not looking too bad. The silver's a bit stark compared to the dirt and other crud that's under here, but the main thing for me is making sure that these don't get any moisture in between the plates, and I think we pretty much achieved that. So all these plates are done now. I've just got to wait for the subframe to come back from the zinc plater. Then we can press in some of the bushes that I got, the solid bushes, into the subframe. And I think we can put the subframe back in here, probably put all the arms on, chuck the diff in, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I'm probably being a bit optimistic here, but hopefully that'll be the last time we need to do all that. Probably not though, not with the way things are going, but a man can dream. I'm back up the top of the hill today. It's been a few weeks since we painted the underside of the car. It's hopefully going to be a big day for us. We've got all the bits and pieces we need to do final assembly on the rear end. After all this time doing rear reinforcements and all the 370Z diff stuff, it's going to be a big day to finally get that all back in the car for the final time. Been waiting on some parts. We've got the couple of bits that I needed here to finish it all off. So these are the last couple of bits that I've been waiting on. Obviously you've seen this subframe before. What we've had done to it is it's all been zinc plated. The good thing about zinc plating is it protects in all the areas that you can't really get a pressure pack into. And there's quite a few on this that are going to be a bit difficult to get a spray pack or a spray gun to get the paint into. So that's all done, looking pretty good. I like the colour because it means we can nice and easily spot any cracks that might appear. Being a home built thing, we need to be able to spot cracks nice and easy. So really happy with how that turned out. So the other thing you're probably going to notice on the subframe here is these nice anodized purple solid subframe bushes. These are from CMP, and that's the same company that did the plates for the underside of the car. These are good for a number of reasons. Obviously anytime you get rid of rubber bushes out the back of a competitive drift car, it's going to be a good thing. The other thing is these actually raise the subframe up in the back of the car, and that's going to help with any issues you might have with the geometry of the car in regards to lowering it. But also when we put those plates in there and weld them in, we're actually making that problem worse by essentially pushing the subframe further away from the floor of the car. So with these bushes here, it goes a long way to, well, it fixes that, but it also actually makes it even better than stock. So you can sort of see how they work down here. Well, it looks nice and pretty here on the bench, but I think it's about time that we chuck the diff in it, put all the arms on it, and put it in the car for hopefully the final time.
Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you.
One of the last things we needed to do was just slice down the thread on this axle, which is we've got an issue where the center cap won't be able to go on if we hadn't done that. So we've given this a bit of a cut and a clean up. We've also turned down the spacer that we had made up previously so that it's a good length. So again, the nut doesn't protrude through the center cap of the wheel. Now we've done that, we'll just bolt it all together and that should be the axles all sorted.
Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true.
Well, that's another episode of Smokey and the One-Armed Bandit, all in the bag and done. I've got a lot of little jobs done, which has been the aim of this episode. They've been building up in the back of my mind for a long time, so it's good to tick a whole bunch of them off. Obviously, the car's sitting under its own weight now, which is a bit of a milestone for us. We're doing lots of work back there with the reinforcing and all the diff bits and pieces, so nice to get that all bolted in there, hopefully for the last time. I'll probably have to pull an arm or two out or an axle out at some point to get access for fuel lines and brake lines, but fingers crossed that I'm not going to have to pull the whole subframe out again. I've also been shooting a few episodes simultaneously because we've been doing lots of work on different parts of the car, so hopefully we've got a bit of a backlog of footage there for me to edit up and get these episodes out a bit more regularly, because it's been probably 4 months since I've put one of these out there. So hopefully it won't be too long. You'll get episode 8 and we'll see you then. Fucking car. It's hot. Why are you here? Fucking everything is fucking hitting me.